What would you like for me to say? Testing 1, 2, 3. How's that? That works. Okay. Okay. The, the reason we're going to do this way is because, number one, I don't want this to be perceived as a lecture kind of thing, because as I was telling Philip a little while ago, having done these seminars a few times, usually when someone comes to the cancer venue, then either A, they are dealing with it within their family, B, they are either survivors of past treatments, they're presently in it, or they're past that to this point in time, or 3, they fall into the category of caregivers. And so therefore, it's somewhat like they've been there, done that already. And occasionally we'll have someone that's never been here before that's just here for information, but that's totally fine. But I feel like that it's always a need for us to be as personal and as relevant as possible in regard to what we're talking about. About 9 years ago, next month, I started working with the Clearview Cancer Institute there in Huntsville, Alabama, a cancer facility that had already been in existence for several years. They built a brand new facility out there in Huntsville, and I had heard about the program. We had several church members that had been there before, but a dear friend of ours that had worshiped in another congregation had at that time, one bout with cancer and was in remission. And so typically I work, my schedule is Monday to Thursday at the office. Of course, Sunday, very busy, but typically I'm off on Fridays. And so I decided, after talking to Bonnie and whatever, I said, I want to just be a volunteer out there. And I was talking about, getting and pushing people from wheelchair from place to place, whatever. And so I mentioned this to my dear friend, and she said, well, I'll talk to the PR people out there and whatever. And so long story short, they asked me to come and visit with them, and so they were looking at my resume and whatever, and the lady says, you've got a master's degree in counseling? And I said, yes. And she said, oh, okay. We have been thinking about an idea of having some kind of support program, and said, we'd like to talk to you later on. So it just sort of all mushroomed into me starting a program that we called Coping with Cancer. And so I started we meet twice a month on Fridays, in which I do a Coping with Cancer class program, 2 hours one Friday, and then whenever the next Friday is during that month, about 1 hour. And so I've been doing that for 9 years now. And as always, I learn far, far more from them than I do from them learning from me. And in fact, the very first time I met with this program, I met with these individuals, and they had the Institute had a program as to how they were going to set up who was going to be there. And so I only had 4 individuals that first time. But anyway, they all came into the class, and so I had them to write their name and whatever. And of course, I'd never met them at all. Didn't have any kind of background with them. Good morning, ma'am. And so I basically told them, I said, I called out their names, and I said, I just want you to know that I don't know anything about your cancer. And I said that to each one of them. And when I said that to each one of them, they looked at me and I said, so you're probably wondering, why did I waste my time here? And I said, and I hope at the end of our class together, you won't say that. But I said, I just want you to know that obviously I am not the authority on cancer. There is no such person except for those who are going through cancer. And so that's how we sort of started the program. Good morning, sir. So what we're going to do today is we're going to look at, in this particular class what cancer survivors should know. And in order for us to do that, let's think about for just a moment. When you're dealing, I'm going to back up so nobody has to look at the back of my crazy looking head. And Don, yes, has one too. So, okay. Good to have you with us, sir. First of all, let's just sort of find out what we have here. How many of you are cancer survivors? And again, remember the word survivor means that the minute you're diagnosed, you're a cancer survivor. How many cancer survivors do we have? Okay. Okay. And then others are obviously caregivers, I would imagine. Is that right? Okay. When you hear the words, you have cancer, what happens? You don't hear it.
I had to ask my doctor. I had to say, what did you just say? Because it didn't register.
Okay.
My
Okay.
body heard it.
Okay. What'd you feel devastated. What else? Okay, it's time to fight. You went from one of my first survivors in my class came. She said I went from fright mode to fight mode. Okay. Now, for other folks, they may have thought what? Oh my, I've just received a death sentence. Because we've heard the horror stories before. You know, we've heard and we've all, unfortunately, we've heard them from other people. And so therefore, when you hear the word cancer, then you go from A to Z in regard to your feelings and what you're going through, and that's certainly okay. And most of the time, when we're dealing with that, you don't. You're dealing with situations that people obviously are thinking about, and you're saying, okay, I don't know if I need to deal with this anymore. Would you say that cancer is a wake-up call? A wake-up call. What am I meaning by that? It's a wake-up call of like nothing ever before in one's life. How? Why is it a wake-up call? Or why can't it be a wake-up call? Okay. Or I've got to start getting on a strict diet, eat the right things, whatever the case may be. Yeah. And I think when in fact I've had people tell me, said, not that I chose to have cancer, because as we talked about last night, no one ever volunteers for cancer or any other debilitating illness. But when I was diagnosed with cancer, it made me look at my life like never before. And I'm not talking about just the spiritual. It made them look at my life physically, what I was doing mentally, what I was doing socially, what I was doing psychologically. It made me sort of stop and say, is this where you want to go? Is this what you want to do? Now, would you think that cancer affects us in every part of our body in regard to personality and whether such things? How so? What would you say?
It makes
Okay. Yeah.
And most of the time they can't go back to their normal life. They have to change everything
Okay.
and readjust
Right.
what they were doing because of the illnesses.
Okay. It not only makes you re-examine your priorities, but also it makes you sort of think about, okay, what is it that I want to be doing with the rest of my life now that I've been diagnosed with cancer, or that I've been dealing with? That work? That better?
I'm not gonna pick up these.
Okay. Okay.
I got you.
Very good. Uh-oh, that's scary. He's got me. Ugh. Okay. I've heard about you already. Okay. So it does make us look at everything that we're doing. Okay. Dr. Roger Granett says, the only way to begin to understand cancer as a disease is to call it what it is, tear down the wall of silence, close the distance between ourselves and the disease, say the word out loud, and admit the feelings it raises. In other words, decide what cancer means to you, figure out what that's going to do to where you are, and then just start, okay, here it is. Now, you mentioned that you decided to go straight into fight mode. How hard was that for you?
It wasn't very hard at all, to be honest. I knew I had to, without to survive, but that did change my priorities,
Okay,
tremendously, reassess my life,
right.
and all that I was doing at the time,
Yeah,
and my future.
exactly. Because cancer, just like dementia and Parkinson's and all the many other of the dreaded diseases that we face in life, it carries with it not only a bunch of baggage, but also you go back from your past, you go where you are now, and then you go to the future with it. And you're saying and see, that's the part that we don't understand. What I'm going to do is I'm going to give. I think this is it. Yeah, this is it. Let me just give you what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you these notes, and that way you can follow along and we can relate much better to it than you just listen to me, because again, I don't want this to be a lecture. So, what Dr. Granett was trying to say is, okay, when you look at cancer, you've got to understand what it means to you, what it means to your family. As I mentioned last night, it only affects you, but it certainly affects everyone that you're relating to. They tell us in life that we all need to be heard, respected, understood, valued, and loved. That's what we need in life. They also tell us if two of those things are not happening in regard to where we are with our life, then there's the tendency that we begin to become depressed. And we'll talk about depression later on in our time together, later on in our morning program. But we need to understand that when we're dealing with that we're looking at it from the perspective of, okay, here's something that's happened to me. I didn't volunteer for it. Yeah, there may have been something in my life that may have caused a predisposition for it. It could be genetic, it could be otherwise. But still, I didn't sign up for this. But yet, I want, as this life continues for me, I want to be heard. I want to be seen as an individual that needs information. I need to be sure that I understand where I'm coming from, coming from, and I need to be sure that everything that goes on in my life is going to be okay in that regard. I use the phrase cancer land. And when we're dealing with cancer land, and we all have our own cancer to deal with, and it's ours to deal with, what is it that we need from others? Well, we need to know, first of all, it's going to affect us physically, mentally, socially, spiritually. Now, how does it affect us physically? Well, we all know. There may be surgeries. There may be things that we have to take care of, the chemotherapy, the radiation, the medications. I know that Thea is the expert here in regard to nursing and whatever, but most of my folks that take my class that come into my classes will talk about all the side effects of those medications, and in fact, someone said, I wish they just wouldn't tell you what the side effects were because they're so scary to have to deal with, and that taking one kind of medication will, as it were, mess up something else that you're taking. And therefore, there's, and we from time to time in our classes, we bring in the pharmacist, the head pharmacist of CCI, and she will try to tell us, okay, here's the new immunotherapy coming on, and here's what's going to be done with genomics, and here's what's being done in regard to looking at what the new research is going to be doing and what this is going to mean to medications, or what this is going to mean to treatments. And it's mind-boggling. It really is mind-boggling. And so you've got to, and again, you're struggling. The doctor's trying to do their best to take care of you. The nurse practitioner is there to as one of my survivor ladies mentioned, she said, the doctor tells me everything that he's supposed to tell me in his language, and then the nurse practitioner comes in and says, now this is what he just said. So probably most of you can relate to that. And I don't think that's just down in Alabama that happens, because there's a lot of stuff that goes on that and there's some doctors that can explain it in layman's terms, and there are others that don't have that ability to do so. Or at least maybe they don't want to. But the point of the matter is, it's going to affect you physically. How does it affect you mentally? How can cancer affect you mentally? Ma'am?
Really hard to deal with.
Okay.
It's very, yes, it's very scary. The unknown, I think, is what is more hard to deal with than what you know.
Right. In other words, what you know is not nearly as much as what you don't know.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And therefore, the lack of information can be the scary part. Yeah. And let's face it, at the beginning of a diagnosis, it's just the beginning. And therefore, they don't know how you're going to respond to this treatment. They don't know the extent, particularly if they've not done any kind of exploratory surgery or biopsy. They don't know where it is in your body. And so if that's the case, then you're sort of, again, it's like crossing your Bay Bridge over there, and you're saying, I read the other day that they had some problems on the Bay Bridge in regard to some of the suspension stuff. I wonder if that got fixed yet. Jokingly, we were on the other side of the bridge and had stopped someplace before and my wife said something to the lady, said, I understand that a lot of folks have problems with the Bay Bridge. She said, yeah, a lot of folks have a lot of fear going across that bridge. I said, I guess that's the only option there is, unless you can swim. And she said, that's the only option you got. Well, in cancer, you're dealing with, and I guess you go by boat, but if you didn't have one, you'd be in trouble. Exactly. Yeah. How many folks are? How many folks can I count on to be there for me, regardless of what they think about what I'm going through?
Who's going to come and take care of my children or feed them for me because I can't get out of bed?
Exactly.
Versus who's going to text and say, "Oh, sorry, you're not feeling good."
Exactly. Yeah.
And it wasn't a, "Oh, I just don't feel good." It was.
Yeah. Exactly. And that's extremely important. And unfortunately, you have to facilitate that along with everything else you're going through. Yes, sir, Lance.
I was going to say, I think that also some people maybe avoid you because they don't know how to handle it. They don't know how to cope with what you're dealing with.
Yeah.
Not necessarily they right or wrong, they just don't understand or can't cope themselves
Right.
with what you're dealing with.
Now, I would love to think that this person was only from Alabama and that there's nobody else in the entire other 49 states that thinks this way or act this way. But I actually had a lady that was told by one of her friends, she said, "I'm sorry, but said, we no longer can be friends now that you've been diagnosed. I can't handle any more drama in my life." Now think about that one for a while. And she was, the lady was, unfortunately, she was brutally honest about that comment. And I asked the survivor, I said, "What did you think?" She said, "Well, after I got over the anger of it," she said, "it sort of gave me satisfaction." It said, "Mark them off my list," because I knew that they weren't going to be there. And so therefore, I would not feel like that I needed to spend time with them or let them know what was going on. And she said, "I guess in the long run, it was probably a good thing to find out on the front end, this person's left the ship. They're not going to be in my lifeboat." Yes, ma'am.
For me, I worried about being a hurt to other people, and it was especially hard because
Yeah, right. So you were the caregiver for everybody else, and now that you're having to be cared for, you felt like it was a burden. Yeah, exactly. And of course, a lot of times that happens. It may be because that's just your personality. It obviously, being the gender you are, ladies are they're the cog that makes the wheel go round and round and round. They're the center thing that makes everything else work. And a lot of times when they're down, then they realize not only has it caused, just like you mentioned, not only can I not get out of bed and take care of my kids, but said, I don't even have the strength to take care of myself. And I feel so helpless to ask for someone else to come do something for me. Yeah. I mean, and see, most folks don't ever think about that when it comes to the idea of cancer. Well, how are you doing today? Well, do you really want to know how I'm feeling right this second? Because right now I'm feeling like I'm a burden to everyone and I shouldn't even be here. And then there's the spiritual part. Why did this happen to me? God, are you trying to get my attention? God, did you cause this? God, did I do something wrong for you to punish me this way? I mean, on and on and on the questions can be asked. The Jonah syndrome. Oh no, I better. In fact, I've had people act that way. Well, I can't spend any more time with them because I'm afraid that I may get what they have. And so just go ahead and throw Jonah off the ship, and we'll just forget he ever existed. Or the Job syndrome. Job, what did you do to cause God to punish you this way? Now, but both of those theologies are wrong. But yet there's that thinking there. Or the idea of, well, God caused this to happen because he knew that I was about to make terrible mistakes. Well, God doesn't cause pain. James chapter 1:17 said that every good gift and every perfect gift comes from God. So it's not that, there's a difference between God causing something and God allowing something. Now, spiritually speaking, I know that there's a man that my dad was a longtime minister there in the Northport, Alabama area, right across from Tuscaloosa. Should I say Roll Tide? I did. I'm sorry. Anyway, but there was a man that my dad had been working with for those 50 plus years, trying to get the man to get right with God. And he would not, he'd come to church, but that was it. He was not interested at all in anything else. And then Dad gets a call from Dred City Hospital from this man, and he said, Brother Joe, I need you to come. And Dad, of course, went. He said, I just got diagnosed with terminal cancer. He said, I'm ready to listen now. And the man said, if it had not been for my cancer, I probably never would have gotten right with God. But said, now I know that my life is going to end one of these days. Now, he had several more good years, but he got his life right with God. And he said that was the only thing. And he said, Brother Joe, I'm sorry for that. I was the way I was all those years when I said no to you, and said I should have listened, and I should have listened to my good godly wife. But said, now I know, and now I understand. Now, but the point of the matter is we need to understand that cancer affects us in so many different kinds of ways. And it affects not just you, but who else? Everyone else around your circle. Yes, sir. Right. Right. Exactly. Good point. Yeah, and that's, I think that that's a very mature way of looking at it. I've often said it's easy to blame God for everything that's not His fault, we're used to doing that for anything and everything. You know, we even have in insurance policies the act of God, and yes, it's in there, and that's the phraseology that they use in regard to something that happens, in regard to some natural disaster and whatever. But yet it's so easy to blame God for something that's not his fault. But then when like you said, when you're face to face with something that can be life-threatening, okay, I'm up to bat. What am I going to do with it? How am I going to face this? And some folks do really well with it, but you know, it takes. I'll go back to what you said. It takes a lot of not only courage, but mental stability, and as well as sustenance to be able to face yourself and say, okay, God, you know, okay, here I am with you, and now how strong is my faith? How dedicated am I to this, to what I've said all my life as a minister? Yeah, or as a Christian for that matter. And we've got to remember that. And we also got to remember that some folks will not do it, you know, some folks will not do as well as others will. And it may not be their lack of faith, it may be the severity of what they're going through. Well, you can blame Satan for situations of life. You know, I mean, we obviously, they still, I mean, they can tell us everything they want to tell us about cancer, but yet we don't understand why it can be in someone's body and never cause any problem, where it can be in other folks and it'll just explode everywhere in the world. So the point I'm making is it's going to affect that way. Okay, your attitude and your fight will be essential as you go through treatment. Now, one of the men in my class is he is Mr. Attitude. Everything, you know, his basically anything that is said by anybody else, well, remember your attitude. Remember your attitude. Now, they tell us that attitude does help. The way you look at something will definitely have an effect on on what will happen in the long run. At the same time, there are times and there are days and there are situations of life when it's really hard to get up and say, yes, I'm ready for another fight because of the way I feel. And so don't beat yourself up. In fact, that's what I always tell people. I said, please don't be too hard on yourself when you're having a pity party. One of our ladies said that I had a dear friend she said, I gave her my permission at the very beginning of my fight with cancer that lasted 7+ years. She said, I told her, you have my right, my permission any time to tell me to get off my pity pot. She said, because I know coming from you, you'll be right. And said, but be sure to allow me to be on the pity pot from time to time. The lady said, that's okay. And she did. And she said, I could count on her. She said, she said she was sort of my barometer of how I was looking at things and how I was dealing with my cancer. Because she said, because when she told me, okay, Carolyn, get off, then I knew it was time to find the fortitude, the vitality to get up and to start changing the way I looked at things. She said, but I also look forward to those pity pots from time to time, those parties, and she said sometimes it was nice to have someone and just come in and say, I think you need to go rest. I think you need to go to bed. I think you need to just take it easy and don't try to keep doing what you're doing today because it's not working today. Does that make sense? Yeah. And it's nice to have someone that goes along with you that has that kind of fortitude of mind. That's why I tell people to feel what you feel. You know, when you ask that question at church, well, how are you doing today? Do you really want to know? just be honest. Well, today's not a good day. On a scale of 1 to 10, I'm about a -2. Or today's a 4. Today's a 6. But, just for a period of time, feel what you feel. The more information that there is, I'm going to pass around in a few minutes the Cure magazines that I mentioned this morning, or I mentioned last night, and I gave you several of the things also inside the Cure magazine. If you turn to their page, usually like page 3 or 4 or 5, you can take a picture of the information where you can actually go online and sign up for it. But and like I said, I got some of the magazines for you just to sort of give an idea. But 4 times a year, they will send you, along with, usually they do a year-round, end of the year summary magazine that they send out as well that has a lot of good information. But the more information, valid, true, accurate information from reliable, relevant sources, not the other kind, that will help you. Because the more you know, the better decisions you can make. That's what I'm talking about. And again, if you're the kind of disposition or personality that you don't want, you don't need all that information, then have someone that is your research lab person. Okay? That's what you need. And we've already talked about it's not your fault. Turn to the next page real quick. Cancer and the fear factor. Okay, let's just pick a couple of those. Someone pick one that just sort of jumps off the page at you in regard to cancer and the fear factor. Lisa, I'll pick on you in a second. Which one just sort of jumps off the page at you?
I didn't have a chance to read all these, but what I was most scared of was that if it was the cancer was in one spot, then probably it was all over my body. I was scared that it was everywhere.
Okay. In regard to, so therefore, the fear of it being just totally all over your body, out of control. Okay? What's another one there?
Second one down, fear or loss or struggle with religious belief.
Yeah. Why? Why do you think that would be a?
Life can't go on without that.
Okay. Yeah. How is this going to?
You lose faith in your creator and life isn't worth living.
Yeah.
So then your battle, if you go into your battle with that attitude, then you're already lost.
Yeah. And going back to what you said, fear of my faith with him in regard to this struggle. Yeah. What else? What's another one?
Can I just add on to that? One of the saddest situations that I saw in my nursing career was I was taking care of an older gentleman who had some kind of terminal cancer, which I don't know. He had some kind of terminal cancer. He was in the hospital, and it was really, we were close to the end of life. And his wife said to him, "You can beat this, you just don't have enough faith."
Ooh, ouch. Yeah.
And I mean, I wouldn't disagree with her, but I didn't. But I think that is wrapped up in that whole, this is like faith, or this has to be, we're going through this because of something that you did, you're not doing something right.
Right.
Kind of thing. I felt so bad. I don't, wasn't really anything that I could say.
Yeah, well, that's when it's difficult as a caregiver or you're a professional person in regard to someone that said something, okay, you just don't have enough faith, therefore that's why you're still sick or that's why you're getting worse, whatever. And of course that destroys that person from the inside out because, likely they think that their faith is, they think that where they are at that point in time, they're there by the grace of God anyway. And yet for someone to say, well, you're just not handling this very well, and therefore it's because of your lack of faith, that's very difficult. Yeah. And then you've got folks who don't have any beliefs, don't have any faith in God. And I've had several in my class that they just walked in and said, me and Jesus just don't see eye to eye. And I said, and that was sort of their beginning statement to them. And I said, you're welcome to our class. I said, you do know my background, don't you? And they said, yes, I know your background, but said, I just want you to know that. I said, fine. You're welcome to class. Come on in. And it's interesting that during the time that they were in that class, to their ultimate death, I think they learned to respect the people of faith that were there, because number one, they didn't force it on them. And secondly, because they saw the way that they dealt with their cancer, it made them appreciate and maybe perhaps look at themselves and realize that's something I don't have. And so it was, and when they passed away because of the seriousness of their cancer situation, their family said, would you please facilitate the celebration of life service? I said, I'd be glad to. And we talked about faith at that celebration of life service. So I think the point that we need to make is when we're dealing with cancer or some other debilitating disease, there is going to be that faith issue that comes up. Another one of those. Yes, sir. Right. Exactly. Yeah.
That's a great comment.
But the first one here about the fear of the unknown future, and it's tied to the mental aspect. And again, one of the things that I dealt with and still do is that from the mental standpoint, once you
Right. Exactly. Exactly. Right. Yeah. One of our ladies said, I keep waiting for the other the other leg to drop. Because every time they go for the scans, like you said, or the PET scan, or wherever it is that they're taking, you're waiting for that, because you go back to the past when you first got that diagnosis, when you were totally, you had no idea at all. And then you're saying, okay, it happened once, it happened again, you probably heard about the guy that was fearful of, he was in the Army, and he paratrooper, and he had to jump out of the plane, and he just knew that something bad was going to happen. And so they said, now if you pull your ripcord and it doesn't happen, he said, pour the second, the emergency one, and said, when you get down at the end, when you get down there into the land, there will be a truck waiting for you. And said the guy jumped out and he pulled the first one and it didn't happened. He pulled the second one, and he said, yeah, and I bet there's not a truck down there waiting for me either. You know, he was a pretty much pessimist. Well, that's the way a lot of people are when it comes to their cancer. I just know that it's going to happen yet again. Well, we don't know that, but that's the unknown part that bothers us. Yes, ma'am. Right. So the unknown part is the unknown of your family, what they're going to be dealing with. Yeah, and again, that's because of a person being responsible. That's exactly the way you feel. Is okay. How are they going to be able to survive without me? Yeah, that's an excellent point. Yes. Right. Exactly. Right. Yeah. And exactly. Yeah, and unlike a person that dealing with cancer, you don't have a scheduled PET scan to find out how you're doing. Yours is it could happen any second, any minute of the hour of the day, and therefore when it does, you're down for the count. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. 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 Exactly. Yeah. That's a very real thing you've talked about. Let's do this. Let's take a break, and we'll move on. The reason you got what I'm using my notes is because we're probably not ever going to finish any one of these sessions, and that's why you can just look at the rest of it for yourself. And if you see something you want to talk about, let's bring it up the next set. So we're so close to the food and the coffee and the juice and the restrooms, so we can just take advantage of this, unlike the folks over there. So let's just take a break for right this second, and we'll come back in a few minutes. Okay, I passed around the Cure magazines. This session is the one entitled What Cancer Survivors Need from Others. And the reason we're talking about this is because obviously we don't need to be dealing with cancer by ourselves. We said that it will affect others around us, but as suggestive of the topic, we need something from other individuals. Be sure to look around at the Cure magazine. You get an idea of what it's about. If you look at the front couple of pages, it gives the information about subscribing. No cost involved at all. You know, these are just different ones that I've got for you to look at, just sort of give you an idea of what you get from the monthly, from the quarterly report. But anyway, but it's very, very helpful in that regard. And I also handed out the little cards in case you're interested. This is the information on the Cure magazine, and then there's one called the Heal magazine that comes out from time to time as well, in case you're interested. And you can just fill that out, or you can go online and get one as well. So there you go. All right. First of all, let's just not presuppose anything. Do cancer survivors need others in their fight with cancer? Why? They, as a nurse, teaching nurses,
Well, they need a whole support system for all kinds of things. I mean, sort of like what we're talking about, like physical, emotional, mental. I mean, they may need somebody just simply take them to treatments,
right?
but also somebody just that they can be honest to talk about how they feel and, maybe, some of the things that we talked about a while ago, I think maybe Sean brought it up, but I think, talking about maybe questioning their faith, somebody that they can actually be honest about that and,
Right.
And talk about, if they have feelings of, why did God let this happen to me?
Right. Yeah.
Why, like I've tried all my life to be a good person, why did this has happened to me? I mean,
Right.
I think those are conversations that people need somebody they can talk. No one will judge them,
Right.
and they can talk about that because they need to.
Right. We had a lady years ago that came up to us and talked to us about a grief loss that they had that she and her family had suffered, and she talked about the difficulty. And we later on, Donnie and I talked about this. We said, "Can you imagine the courage that this lady had? Total strangers coming up and, as it were, sort of just or emptying her soul to us." She said, "For years I could not pray." And she said, now I could pray now, but said for years I could not pray because of all that had happened. And it was a devastating loss. And it was one of those losses that didn't just occur, it was time-lapsed in regard to all the other things that happened after the loss that just continued to compound the situation. And she said, and to this day, I cannot study the book of Job. She said, when our Bible classes has the curriculum Job, she said, I go to the alternative class. She said, I just cannot handle Job. Well, that took courage for that lady to say that. And for her to say that to us, we said, ma'am, that's, thank you for sharing that with us. But we, that just sort of gives you an idea of what we're talking about here. When we're dealing with something as devastating as cancer, we need someone there. Notice they need friends and family to stay around, not forget them. All too often, here's what happens, and this is true in regard to dementia, this is true in regard to cerebral palsy, in regard to Parkinson's, whatever the case may be. We will put them on the top of our prayer list for how long? A month. That's a good point. Yeah, about a month. We'll put them up on our top, and they're constantly in our mind. They're constantly in our thoughts. We'll write them notes. We'll send them emails. We'll give them a phone call. We'll check on them wherever we run into them. And then what happens? I'm sorry, what? Everybody decide. They sort of gradually sort of just start moving away. Now, in cancer, what I've been told, and I think I've seen it often, is once they go into remission, or if they are able to go into remission, or if they've had the successful surgery and there's not anything, there's not anything else that has to be done for any kind of period of time, what do? Okay, you're from the top of the list down to the bottom of the list. Or if it seems like that you're doing better, you're better now. Okay, and it's almost, and I hate to say this, but it's almost like we sort of congratulate ourselves that our prayers did this for that individual, and we're so glad that they're doing well, and now I can move on to somebody else that needs me more. There's something wrong with that. That's not good thinking in that regard, because I need to be, I need to be constantly involved, and I know we can't be all things to all people, but Paul said he tried to do that. So the Apostle Paul said he tried to do that so that he could try to win some and help some. Well, I need to be constantly in mind of those individuals. And as someone told me, she said, I really appreciated all the attention I got while I was in the struggle to get into remission. But once I got into remission, they all went away. And said it would have been really helpful to have had someone to have talked to about being in remission. That makes sense? And just to have checked on me, she said, and they said that would have been really, really helpful. Celebrate what we have, not what they don't have. What's the difference? If everything is going well with your cancer treatment, you have there you go. Okay. If everything's going well with your cancer treatment, you want folks to celebrate while all the things are going on with you. What if it's not? I had a lady said, I feel like that I flunked graduating from Cancer 102. 101 I did all right on, but said 102 is not working too well, and said everybody, when they come to me, the comments that they're making to me, like, you flunked. You're not doing too well. You're not passing the test. And she said, I'm doing everything the doctor tells me to do and then some. So what do you do there? And my suggestion is celebrate where they are, not where you think they ought to be. And there's a big difference there. Now, how do you do that? Any ideas? You encourage them.
My daughter is stable right now.
Okay.
She's stage 4.
Right.
And she's found out that the cancer's in 3 places.
Yes, ma'am.
And every time she goes to the doctor tells her, stay positive, that everything's going to be fine, that the treatments are working, but she's not seeing an improvement right now.
Right.
And he told her, that's fine, just we're working on it and stay positive.
Okay.
So that's what we try to do. We try to encourage them.
Right.
Stay uplifted.
And it's easy. It's easy for the doctor to say that.
But it's hard.
But it's harder for you as a parent or as a caregiver or as a loved one or as a mate or as a child of a mate or a mother or a dad of a mate of a person dealing with that to say, okay, what can I say now? Yeah. Go ahead.
get this treatment to work right for me. So,
Yeah.
it's just like almost like a full circle. Like it's not working, so there's that sort of grief and loss, and then like it's the you don't feel better, so there's that, and then you're letting other people down, so there's that. Like it's like a whole cycle.
It's just, yeah.
Just gonna go back to bed.
Yeah, it is a vicious, and you just mentioned something that we got to remember. Cancer is a grief loss. The continual situation. You folks thought y'all weren't going to get the word grief in here after 4 years ago. Yeah, it's a grief loss. What you're going through when you go to the doctor and the doctor says, "Well, it's not responding as well as we want it to," that's a grief loss. That's a reality check. And so it's important to remember that when you're dealing with those situations, status quo may be really good right now. I have a dear Christian friend, preacher's wife in Kentucky, and the last time she went to the hospital for a regular checkup, one of the doctors said, "You mean you're still alive?" And she said, "Yes, I am." He said, "I'm not saying that in a derogatory, negative way." Said, "What you have gone through is just beyond my comprehension." And of course, she quickly said, "Prayer and God." And she said, "I agree." And so he didn't mean it as a negative statement. But the point of the matter is, sometimes you've got status quo sometimes really good, and we've got to remember that. We need people to recognize where they've been with cancer and where they might be going, and where they've been, we know. Where we're going, we don't know. But that's true of anything in life. I don't know. I don't know what you say in Delaware, but we say that the worst drivers in all the world are in Huntsville, Alabama. I'm sure that's not the case, but for us it is. Oh, okay, from Pennsylvania. Okay, but because we're okay, but we think this where do these people learn to drive? And then, of course, we often say, well, they're all the transplants from all of the places that came to Huntsville because they fell in love with our town, and NASA and the Marshall Flight Center and all the other things. Now we've got FBI folks coming in from Washington and everywhere else because they're building a brand new facility there. About 5,000 new jobs coming into Huntsville for that. But you need to recognize where they are and where they've been, and not every day we need a pep talk, but every day we need someone to care. That's the point we need to remember. They need to know, come what may, that they will not walk alone on their journey. Because a lot of times they feel like, what? There's nobody out here that understands. Of course, Lisa's my sister-in-law. When Lisa found out that she had what they told her about her cancer that she had, instantly our entire family just all started praying, all started mentioning her in prayer. Started checking on her or whatever. You just need to know someone's out there. And you also, and if you're getting the idea, you also need selective individuals to do selective things. You need someone that's a communication person. You need someone that's a research person. You need someone that's got the physical ability as well as the time to take you to the treatments. You need someone to take you to the doctor appointments. You need someone to be sure that they're in charge of your medications if you're not going to try to do that yourself, which usually you don't need to because of the side effects of the medications. But so you need as you said, you need a team. You need a team. They need someone to listen. Why is that important? What happens when someone actively listens to what we're saying concerning our cancer diagnosis or where we are with our cancer? What? Shows their care. Now, how do we want them to listen? Listen and then rebuttal? Sometimes. Wow, listening is saying nothing.
Everybody has a story, and the more times you tell your story, it lightens your burden.
Okay?
Tell your story to somebody.
So when you tell your story, it not only lightens you, but it allows you.
When you heard about it, what happened to you, what's helped you, and just I think having somebody to listen makes you feel worthy because they are giving you their time.
Yeah, and that, like I mentioned that last night, one of the original guys, he said, how are you doing? Well, do you have 10 minutes? And he really meant, it's going to take me 10 minutes. Someone, how about 5? He said, no, it's going to be taking you 10. If you're interested in hearing, I got 10 minutes for you. Well, he said, I found out real quick, like the ones who really were caring versus the ones who really just were going through the checklist. Okay, how are you doing today? Fine. Okay, I'll move on. How we sometimes do.
Years ago, I had a friend who had a baby. 4 days, the baby died. And when my wife and I went to go visit, we prayed before we left because you don't know what to say.
Exactly.
And we just listened, hardly said anything. And the couple told us that that was the best blessing. And we felt blessed for being there. We felt blessed for being there for them, and they felt blessed for us being there. Sometimes saying nothing is what's needed.
Well, it's like Lisa said, like you mentioned, when you say very little, number one, they know that you've not prepared your speech before getting there. Okay? Secondly, it says, I'm listening to what, I'm not here for me, I'm here for you. When you go to I always thought the silliest question we ask anybody when they're in a hospital, well, how are you doing today? Well, I'm in a hospital, I'm all hooked up. Think about that. That's not really a good thing to say. So I always go in and say, well, it's good to see you today. And I've actually had someone say, well, it's not good seeing you today. I thought, okay, it must be a rough day. And I quickly exit pretty quickly. But the point of the matter is you're there for them, not the other way around. And when you say little and care much, you can tell the difference. You really can tell the difference. And that's extremely important.
I think a lot of people, when they're listening to people with illness or cancer or anything really, they have this tendency to want to fix people.
Exactly.
And when you listen instead of trying to fix someone, then it takes the burden off of the person that's talking too. Because if you, for me, like if I find like, okay, well if I talk to this person about how I really feel, and then they're going to tell me about, trying this diet and eating this and taking this, and talk to your doctor about this and how have a good day.
Yeah.
Like, you don't need everybody to try to fix you.
Right.
That's what you have doctors for,
Exactly.
even if they can't fix you. But I mean, like, that's what you have them for. You
Yeah.
have your friends and your family to support you without the fixing part.
That's an excellent comment because, and some of us are worse than others because and men typically are this way. We're in the fix it mode. We want to find out what we're the problem solver and we're the solution maker. We want to know what the problem is. Let me analyze this problem as if I could do that in 5 seconds versus what you've been trying to do for the past 3 hours or the past 4 days. And then once I know what the problem is, then I want to give you a list of 5 things that I think will fix this. And if not, I've got another idea. You see the point? And
Unless you've actually been through like this kind of cancer or this kind of illness or this kind of whatever, like you just have Google. Like really, I can Google too.
yeah,
I mean, I got lots of advice from people about lots of things that I should try to do, or actually my family got a lot of that advice and told me about some of it because after a while I was like, I don't want to hear about their whatever, because that's not what I have.
exactly.
But I think that, like, if you can genuinely relate to someone because, like, well, I have this same thing that you do, and even though my walk is different than your walk, like, I can still relate to, oh, yeah, I took that medication and had X, Y, Z, that's one thing. But if you can't actually relate, then don't try to, because that's not helpful. Well, at least not for me, anyways. Like, it's not helpful.
You're over here about to die, laughing.
Every time she says it, it always makes me think of something, it's like, the person goes in the hospital, oh, my uncle had that, he died from it.
Yeah. If I die, maybe we'll forget it. Like,
We've mentioned Joe and his friends several times already. I think, Joe's friends were true friends when they showed up and they said nothing.
Exactly.
7 days later, that's when they were real friends. But the other thing, what I really wanted to say was that, knowing the individual and that person knowing you, more than anything else, be yourself around that person.
Right.
We just had a member who had surgery, cancer related, and she's home from the hospital. And yesterday, spent time with her, took care of her. And of course, she knows me, I know her, and we're always ratting at each other. Okay, she's tall for a female, and of course, she talks about how short I am. And so she's laying up there, and I go, hey, glad to see you home. And I said, after your surgery, I think you were a lot shorter. And that was the greatest thing I could say to her. She just, because I was being myself.
Right. Yeah.
I was letting her know that, like me. But you know something? It's going to be okay.
Well, when you're yourself or around that individual, regardless of what's happened, that's comforting to them because that tells them, hey, I'm not here on an official visit. I'm here because I care, and I'm going to try to be myself around you, just like we're outside doing where she wished she probably was right now. Yeah. So that's an excellent comment, and that's the way I think we need to be when it comes. Now, again, it's easier to talk about this than to do it. But at the same time, if we have that mindset, I'm going in, regardless of what the circumstance is, for them. That will help you along to go along the way and to say the things that you need to say. And I totally agree with what you said. be as quiet as you can possibly be. Um, I read of a lady that was going to have a procedure that was going to take several hours, and it was going to be I think it was a chemo treatment, so therefore it was going like a 4 or 5 hour treatment, infusion, whatever. And said this lady did not have any family, so among her selective friends, she picked one lady and asked her, "Would you be able to take off work, come to my house the night before, because we have to get up very early to travel into town to do the chemo, and we will be there for 6 hours." And so the lady said that the friend that she asked said, "I came in," she said, "I had my coffee, I was ready to go," and said, "I walked in," and said, "I was sort of bouncing here, there, and yonder around the house before," and the friend just said, "Stop it." And the lady said, "What?" She said, "I asked you because I thought you had the ability to think about what I needed, and I need someone quiet now." And she said, the lady said, "I felt like I had failed caregiving 101. And she said, "I could not believe," because the lady had even explained to her, "The reason I'm asking you to come and be with me is because you have that." And she said, "I failed so terribly." And she said, "It made me think," right? She said, "I'm thinking about me instead of thinking about her." And she said, for the rest of the time, I calmed it down really. I put myself in neutral, and she said I was there for her, and and the lady appreciated it. But we forget that, and we've got to remember that. Over here, good listeners make certain that they are hearing what is being said. They do not have their own agenda. They're there for the patient, not themselves. They allow silence as an answer. They stay through the silence. They listen.
You don't want anybody to make light of your situation and just say, "Well, I'm sure you're going to be fine." I mean, that's different than saying, "Don't worry." That's like, you can solve my problem in 5 minutes, and I've been dealing with this for days.
Right.
So that's a different thing too.
Yeah. And that's why we have to be careful what we say. The lesson from the one we just did, I hope you'll go back and look at those actual quotes. Those were, I sent out a survey to several people that had cancer, and I said, "What is your advice to people in regard to where you're coming from?" And so those are actual cancer survivors that make those comments. And then the lady at the end that was a dear friend of mine that had a 7-year bout with cancer, and she did everything she could possibly do and then some. But she said, "These are lessons that I've learned." So I hope that you'll go back to that lesson that we looked at just the last session and notice from that perspective. But go ahead. No, go ahead.
I don't think there's any situation in life where it's okay to say, "I know how you feel." And it's true.
I to-
I don't think there's any situation in your life that's a good thing to say.
I totally agree.
So we need to just take that phrase out.
Yeah. Now, you know how you felt, but your situation is different from their situation, even if it's the same kind of cancer, even if it's the same kind of protocol, even if it's the same kind of medicine. Your body's going to react differently than their body is. Your situation to treatment and chemo or radiation or the surgery, all those things are totally different. And so when you say that, "I know how you feel," no, you don't. And we got to be careful about that, because that isn't giving any comfort to that person that's hurting.
And it's usually said like people are being, they think they're, well, they think they're being like
Yeah.
by saying, well, how do you feel? But in reality, in a lot of situations, be it grief, cancer, dealing with someone with dementia, whatever it is, no,
Usually that comment's more about the person saying it than the person that's said it to.
Yes, exactly. And also, usually they will say, I know how you feel, and then they will give their example. They got a story for you. And guess what? They don't need that person sitting in the chemo room, or the chemo bed, or table, or the person recovering from treatment, and they don't need another example of another horror story. They just really don't. And so you can say just the opposite. I don't even have the faintest clue how you feel. And just stop right there. I can't, yeah, exactly. I can't imagine. In fact, I had a friend of mine, preacher friend of mine, who was dealing with cancer, and he said the folks who came up to him in regard to what both his situation and that of his wife, who also had cancer, he said that the most comfort I got were the people that just came up to me and said, I cannot imagine what you're feeling, but I love you. He said that gave me more comfort coming from that individual, because he said it was like they were not trying to think something clever to say. They were just admitting, I'm here because I care, but I don't know what you're going through. Unlike Job's 3 friends. Like you said, the first 7 days, they were perfect comforters. Job chapter 2, 1 through 13. Perfect comforter. They traveled from afar. They all came and they did the same thing that he did. They sat there with him in his circle of pain, and they recognized where he was coming from. They mourned his great loss. They didn't say a word. It's when they opened their mouth that they inserted their feet. And how many times have you and I done that? And believe me, when you get that foot in your mouth, you're in trouble. That's a big foot. Some do's and don'ts. Don't tell someone you know about their kinds of cancer, and don't do that, because they're just as their cancer situation is just as individual as them. Their cancer, everything else they're going through. Ask if you can share information. Why is that important? Exactly. And particularly in
Sometimes that brings on more people saying stupid things.
exactly. Exactly. Well, it does. Yeah.
More people giving unsolicited advice.
It's like you said, there's some people you don't really need to come visit you, because they don't know what to say. They don't know how to act. But a lot of folks are very, very private, particularly about certain parts of their body in regard to what's being done to them, and the surgeries that they have to deal with, and the uncomfort that they're dealing with. It could get almost downright embarrassing. And they don't want to have to talk about that. And they may not want to, sometimes I will go to visit someone at the hospital, and someone will say, well, tell me how they're doing. And what they're wanting are the really nitty-gritty little details. I don't do that. I said, and my pat answer is, they are doing the best they can. Period. But be careful about the news reports. On a positive side, any of you ever heard of caringbridge.org? Okay, you're very familiar with it. Great. It's a great tool to have if you want to let someone know, and you'll find out who's genuinely interested. But that's a great way of letting people know the progress report of what you want to state to them from day to day, or from however time you want to do so. In our program, we had someone that did that, and not only can you read their report, but then you can reply back to it and make a comment just thinking of you today, praying for you. Thank you so much for sharing that information. But you also get to read what other individuals have said in that post. CaringBridge.org. Wow. Yeah. Right. Yeah. It reminds you later on of all the people that you had in your life that meant so much to you. Yeah. But it's a great way of notifying others the news you want to share with them. Because, you know, that's why you need to ask permission, because I've known of individuals that they wanted to let certain people know certain things, and then someone just went and stuck it in Instagram and Facebook, and it just blew up without them ever having that opportunity to be able to do that. And that's not good. And they meant well, but they didn't ask permission. How about this one? Don't assume that the patient wants to talk about their cancer. At the same time, don't assume they don't want to. Ask. I mean, I've had people tell me, said, I would go out to eat lunch and said, all we talked about was my condition. Guess what? I didn't want to talk about my condition. I wanted to know how her daughter was in school. I wanted to know how the grandson was doing in softball. I wanted to talk about anything but cancer. And then you have folks that are just the opposite. But again, remember the rule. You're there for them, not the other way around. And that's what we got to remember. If they don't need anything at that time, tell them you were checking on them, and then do that. That's what's wrong with that phrase, call me if you need me. Because you're putting the responsibility on the wrong person there. And what's even better is, look, and you may want to do this in a text or an email or a letter or a phone call. Okay, I may be wrong, but said here are 4 things that I can think of that I can do for you. Select one this week, select one next week, select one. What have you done for them? You've given them the assurance that you're going to be there for them for 4 weeks in doing these things that she needs or he needs done. A lady said that she said her cancer started, and she said the worst part of my cancer was the chemo during the winter and the early spring of the year, and said I cannot tell you how much it was, how much it meant to me when I went out, looked outside in my yard, and there were friends planting bulbs in my garden bed. I didn't have enough strength to even walk out there, much less dig and plant those bulbs. Guess what I look forward to? Guess what gave me hope? To be able to know that they're going to be there in the spring, later in the summer, and I would enjoy them. And every single time I saw those flowers, I thought of my dear friends that did that in the cold weather, early spring. Well, see, that's a practical thing, and a constant reminder. Now, is that hard to do? Is that difficult to do that? Something like that, to be able to say to someone, okay, I want to do something, so here's my list. You change it if you want to. And also, don't, as a lady told me, said, please don't make a promise that you're not going to keep, particularly if children are involved. Because that hurts even more when you've promised to take my children somewhere or to do something with and then you did one thing one time and then you sort of marked me off the list because I had, you know, I've done my due and I can move on. And those children are left. In fact, I had a lady tell me, this is in regard to something else, but she was dealing with, she said, it was my children noticed how many people said something and how few people did something. And she said it hurt them. And because it hurt them, it hurt me even more so. Back of the page, we'll take a little break in just a minute or so. Don't forget the family. Why is the family so important? People deal with cancer, but are there family and folks involved as well? Well, sure they are. Exactly.
Struggling the most, like people from church would bring us food, which was great because I couldn't cook. And my children, well, basically lived with my mom for a while. And like it took some of the like worry about that, like my children, like I would prefer somebody to say, well, I'm gonna make sure your kids are okay than even be worried about me because
Right.
I'm their mom and that's my job was to worry about them.
Right. Exactly. And when you do something for the family, it says as if it's sort of like Matthew chapter 25. You know, when you go feed the hungry, clothe the naked, you know, give food to the, you know, it's as if you did it to me. Well, the same is true for someone in cancer or dementia or whatever. When you're doing something for a family member, it's like you've also given me a great gift as well, because at that point in time I can't do that. And so we need someone. Be genuine. Do not do things out of guilt or obligation, because if you do, guess what? They can smell it a mile away. Oh, I'm just here because it's my duty to do so. Oh no, that's not good. Remember, the caring for the patient does not end with surgery or end of treatment. They'll need it for life. You know, just call and check on them. Hey, how are things going today? Know you've been through a lot. How are you feeling right now? We all need that from time to time. You know, in our communication world, in tech world, there's just really no excuse for not staying in touch with somebody. I mean, we can, you know, just an easy text or email, phone call, those kind of things. Remember, you cannot answer all of their issues. In fact, guess what? Most of the time, they don't want your answers. They really don't. They just want you to come and sit with them, to be there. And then the last thing, think with both your head and your heart. And there is a difference between those two things. Okay, so we're going to move on to the next one in just a moment. So let's go ahead and take a break. We're going to look at in regard to what cancer families need to know. Take a break and help yourself with refreshments and such things. Yeah, Caring Bridge is an email program. You go in, like if you were going to be the person in charge, you're the facilitator, and therefore you set up an email in which you would give a report on either how you're doing or whatever, and then people would subscribe. You'd send out a basic thing saying, you know, for those who might be interested in keeping up with in date, then subscribe, and they will send in, and they get on the, you give them they have a password, and then each time you make a post, they'll see it. they can reply back to it to you, and then others that are in it can see it as well. There's no cost involved, and like you said at the end, there actually is a book that you can put all together. It's a great way to instead of having to call, or email this one, then email that, or tell the story 10 times a day. It's a great way to to avoid that. Are you familiar with this book written by one of our members of the church? He's a chaplain at MD Anderson, and he wrote this book a few years ago. You might want to glance at it if you're interested. So uh, he did a really good job with that. I know he's been with the MD Anderson as one of their paid chaplains for 20 years at least. Are y'all just getting one set of notes? Or you're welcome. You're welcome to have this. Yeah, that's what I was doing. Yeah. Uh huh. Sure. How's it going today? Good, good, good. I'm sorry, what'd you say something? Oh, okay. we're going to go ahead and start. This was the third session, what cancer families need to know about cancer. But before I do that, I want to mention 3 books that I brought with me. The first one is written by Virgil Fry, who is a member of the church in Houston. He is a hospital chaplain for the University of Texas MD Anderson Cancer Center since 1985. Virgil wrote this book entitled Disrupted: Finding God in Illness and Loss. And you're welcome to look at it. I'll just pass it. I think I've already looked at it. So, but anyway, excellent book. He deals with all aspects of the different periods of life that a person deals with in cancer. And of course, from his experience as MD Anderson chaplain, that he's seen a lot. So, excellent book. This one is one, Glory, Hope, Help Me Live, 20 Things People with Cancer Want You to Know. And yes, the title sold me when I saw this book, but the book is just as good as it was the title, in which she deals with, from her, and she had cancer as well. She's a journalist, Emmy-winning documentary filmmaker and speaker, but she dealt with cancer herself, and she started researching others, but she dealt with here's what 20 things I want people to know about cancer. And she did an excellent job with that book. I'll start over here and pass it this way in case you're interested in looking at that. And then, forgot what year this was. In 2017, some of you may be familiar with the Stephen Ministries program. Kenneth Hawk, Haugk, based upon his wife dealing with cancer herself, decided to write 1-volume book trying to answer everything trying to deal with everything you need to know about cancer. And so here's what he did. And it is an excellent resource of going to, and again, being 2017, it's probably one of the most recent things that I've seen. But he did a really, really good job with just everything from medical to emotional to relational to spiritual. Now, obviously, he's not of our brotherhood, but he's very religious and did a good job with this. So anyway, I'll take this one out. This was just sort of the guide that they gave you. But anyway, I'll start here, this in the middle in case you're interested. And of course, I have other books that I would recommend, but these are the 3 that I just brought with me besides the Cure magazines for you to look at, just to have an idea. If you have any questions, let me know about them, or I can suggest other books that I might have read. Of course, there's a lot of good books out there. But anyway, in case you're interested, there you go. Okay. What cancer survivor families need to know about cancer. We've already talked about that in any situation of life, debilitating illness, chronic illness, dementia, cancer, whatever the case is, just like in anything else, the rippling effect is going to be out there for you. And your family is going to be affected just like you are affected by that situation. Today, the phrase second-order patients refers to caregivers. And you can look up that phrase, second-order patients. And what they're talking about is you're not the survivor dealing with the cancer in your body, but you're the second person in line dealing with that person that's dealing with that cancer in that body. And so you're dealing with that. Who is the ideal person that should be the caregiver's or should be the cancer survivor's best friend? Who's the ideal person in helping you deal with your cancer? What do they look like? What kind of attributes do they have?
You know how to navigate the healthcare system.
Ooh, there's spoken from someone that understands that. They know how to navigate the healthcare system. So you're saying, by your comment, you are making the point that there's a need for that.
There is, and it's difficult for people that are work in the healthcare system. It's very difficult, and somebody needs to know how to navigate the healthcare system.
Okay, you want to explain that more? What do you mean by navigate?
Well, like, where is the best place to go to get information? What is the best way to get to the care that you need?
Right,
You know, that kind of thing. So, you know, who do you go to first?
right,
You know, who should you talk to first? Because everybody in a healthcare crisis or healthcare needs a coordinator. You need a healthcare person that's coordinating their care among all the specialists and stuff. And I mean, you would think in reality that person would be your like primary care provider. Sometimes that doesn't work. It doesn't, or it doesn't happen. But you need that person as well. And this person that can help you navigate can help you figure that out. Because in some cases, the best person may be the palliative care doctor that perhaps you need to get in earlier than what most people want to get in.
right.
But that will help them coordinate. Because that's one of the things that I find is that, you know, care is so fragmented. Everybody has like 10 different specialists and sometimes they don't talk to each other.
Exactly.
So you end up duplicating stuff that, you know, that you really shouldn't have to duplicate. But if you, in the like ideal world, if you had a navigator that could help those people all talk to each other, then, you know, that would be wonderful. But our healthcare system is still broken. So
Yeah.
we have to really, you know, I think you really have to like work at that, and you have to have somebody that's pretty, not only savvy, but assertive.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Yes, sir.
One thing about it, you have to have an advocate,
An advocate. Yeah.
somebody to push, you have to have somebody to help.
Yeah. And you need someone on the inside, but you also need someone on the outside. You need, and we're talking about if it's a family member, if it's a friend, if it's a doctor, if it's a family doctor that will go to bat for you, if it's someone at church that just has a great ability to be able to interact with people and they know folks, because I hate to say it, but it really helps to know the people that you need to know when you're dealing with cancer. And you need, because like she said, you know, if you don't have, if you know, in the state of Alabama, of course we have a great program in Huntsville. Huntsville is beginning. We're almost about to bypass Birmingham as being the largest city in Huntsville in Alabama. But in Birmingham, of course, we have the University of Alabama in Birmingham, which is a great resource for the entire state. And they have doctors that go north and south in regard to dealing with all kinds of diseases and basic, you know, and they're a research facility. Now, they're not on the scale of MD Anderson yet, nor probably will they ever be. But they're a research facility so that they have the ability to be able to do things, and you got to have someone that gets you into that frame, framework of how it all works. Because so oftentimes, and you probably know this better than I do, it's tremendously discouraging when you've been diagnosed and they said, come back in 6 weeks for your first appointment. What? 6 weeks? Yes, that's the first appointment we have. Yeah, oh, I'm sure. Yeah, I'm sure it was even probably longer with COVID. but the point, and I'm not saying that you need you don't want to get to the front of the line, but you just need someone that has the ability. They're adaptable, they're knowledgeable, they're relational. They know how to communicate. They know how to get things done. You just got to have someone that falls into, and it may be more than one person. Again, we've talked about sort of having a team. Someone mentioned the idea, as Christians, this applies not just to cancer, not just to dementia. It applies to all situations of life. We need to be people that are actively caring, and that's true. But the important thing is in a family situation, there's probably going to be at least one, if not more than one, go-to person. You need to be really kind to that person later on when they get you through whatever crisis you're going through, because they likely saved your skin more times than you can ever imagine. But I want to explain to you or show you today the role of a family member as caregiver. Typically, unless family members, they don't have any, or they can't trust them, or they don't need to be around them, they're going to be the primary caregivers. Notice the impossible task here. They need to be realistic but positive at the same time. They need to be careful, but they need to be creative in how and what they say and do. They need to be focused but flexible 24/7. Now think about that. How in the world can anybody fall into that category? But that's exactly what you're asking a caregiver to do. Because particularly if you're flat on your back on heavy pain medication, you don't need to be making all those decisions. Nor can you even begin to function and think about what decisions need to be made. But you need someone there that you trust with your life. And I really mean that literally. That will and can be your advocate. I love that phrase. Your navigator, to help you go through what you're going to go through. And again, remember, you're at the beginning of this journey, so therefore what? You don't know what you need later on. But you need to know from the get-go who you can count on. Can we use everyone in our family when it comes to caregiving for cancer or dementia? No, you probably can't. A dear lady that I loved and appreciated, who passed, told me, she said, in my family, I had a cheerleader and then I had a doomsayer. I had to be careful what news I shared with the doomsayer. I did not ever have to be careful what I said to the cheerleader. You understand what I'm saying? In the same family, she said, I had a relative that was always looking for other things I should be doing. And then I had another relative that was, okay, you got your plan in place, let's go. And she said, it was almost like juggling a schedule. Who gets talked to today? Who do I relate this information to? Who do I share the caringbridge.org with? Because I knew if I got to the naysayer or the doomsayer, then I didn't need that today. I didn't need that tomorrow either, or the next day. The cheerleader, I wanted to run everything by just for the information and the encouragement I got, but the fact finder person was the person I wanted to run through everything through, because I knew they'd research it for me. And they'd connect the dots to the different people that they needed to connect. Again, advocate, navigator. And you're saying, I don't know if such a person exists. They do, you just got to find them. And then you've got to ask if they're willing to do that for you. Hopefully and prayerfully they will be. But notice some of the responsibilities. They obviously involve the patient. They communicate with the patient, with yourself, with others. You want to listen to what they have to say. You don't want to interrupt. You want to expect the unexpected. I mean, how many times you probably have heard, how many times have you dealt with, now we think treatment's going to take care of this issue and you should be feeling this way for a few days, and unfortunately it becomes a few weeks or it becomes a month. And again, you're reminded, I'm failing at this. No, it may be just your body saying you can't handle this. I actually had in one of my classes I forgot what kind, I want to say he was a mechanical engineer, worked for a big company there in Huntsville. He could actually document, because he showed me his graft. He could actually document, when I have treatments, when I have chemo, this is how many days I will feel this way. Then this is when I will feel this way, and this is when I mean, he had it charted. It was just amazing. It was just, I mean, I was just, and his wife said he hadn't missed it yet. Now, most folks wouldn't do that. But he did. And to him, it was extremely important to be able to do that, because what he was doing is he was graphing when he could go back to work and be responsible for the responsible job that he had. And so he could tell his employer, I'll be back at work at and yes, I'll have the energy, I'll have the vitality, my brain will be clear of the anesthetics, and I'll be able to handle this. Well, what happened when he had bad days? His wife was right there to pick him up and to sit there with him and say, it's okay. They don't need you at work as much as you think you need to be at work. See? Now, what if he hadn't had that? You think he would have felt like he failed? Sure, he did. Yes, sir.
Observation, get back to the second word, patient and caregiver. My experience is that they really give their all, and sometimes only with themselves and their condition or their health. And so we, together as a team, kind of have to make sure they're taking care of it well. They get their appointments done, they need it, they bypass all that.
Lance, you're exactly right. If they don't take care of themselves, then how can they take care of you? And yet, so often, that's exactly what they do. I mean, I've had people, to their own demise or to their own lack of health, they canceled those doctor appointments. They canceled the needed treatment or therapy. They canceled the upcoming scan for them on something simply because they were taking care of somebody else. Yeah. Look at the second page for just for a moment. They saw problems. I love what Thea said. That you've got to navigate, and you've got to get everybody on the same page. And guess what? That's rather hard to do with doctors, with tests, with treatments, with medication that's, I mean, our pharmacist that we talked to at CCI, she said, I think she told me oncologists spend 6 weeks dealing with pharmacy of study. Is that about right? In their graduate work? Well, she said they're 6 weeks with medicine. She said, I've got 4 years experience. So she said, I have overridden several doctors and they're prescribing medicine because they don't know what that's going to do to that person's body based upon the treatment that they just got. Well, if you don't have and she said, she said, everybody here at CCI, they know that that's my job. You know, I'm the last person checking what's being done, and said, obviously that's my job, and they know that. And said, I'll call them up, and we ask them, so well, what's the response? She said, they usually say, thank you. Thank you for catching that.
One of your points here deals with the team of medical staff regarding treatments and how treatments is progressing. We had a preacher here that got cancer, and he and his wife would go into the doctor's office together and ask if it was okay if they could record on their phone so that they could go back home and listen to make sure that they heard what they were hearing correctly.
Excellent.
And I think that is really good information too.
Exactly. Yeah. Or like I said, if you don't need, you don't need just you going into the doctor visit, or to the scans, or to the, you need 2 or 3 sets of ears.
That was why COVID was so bad, because in a lot of cases, nobody else was allowed to go in the emergency room, in the doctor's office, so.
And it didn't matter if you were talking to somebody able to function well enough to even understand what they were saying.
Right.
And it was, that really did make it bad. But I think, I mean, I've gone with people prior to COVID. I've gone with people to the doctor's office, and my purpose was to make sure they asked the right questions, to make sure they understood what they were being told, and to take notes. So, like that's what I did, is that, like I went in, took notes, and then I would be the one that would say to them, did you understand what he just said about the whatever? Because I was reading their face better than the doctor was.
Exactly.
You know,
Exactly.
if you need somebody that, and it goes back to the whole like navigator thing, you need somebody that can, and that's not as emotionally
Attached.
involved in that conversation.
Yeah, well, I mentioned last night the lady who had the son-in-law that would go to the doctor visits, and he said, my daughters would be bumbling, they'd just be crying their eyes out. And said, he's the one over there talking, and the doctor, what does this mean? What does this mean? And said he was able to take, when we got home, we were able to dissect what the doctor said based upon the notes that he did. Years ago, I was reading a Tom Clancy novel, and about Jack Ryan and all the stuff, and his wife was from Baltimore, John Hopkins University, and she was some kind of specialist in eyes, and she was making, of course, this was just a novel, but she was talking about, well, I learned a long time ago, if I didn't write it down, it never happened. Oh man, I said, I gotta, and that's my philosophy. If you don't write it down, it never happened. You're not going to remember it. So therefore, write it down. Or if you can't spell whatever it is, doctor, write it down right here. I want it so that I can go back at home and research that. But if you don't write it down, it never happened. Because again, like you said, recording what they said, and I can't imagine a doctor not having a problem with that. I really can't if they're there for the right reason.
They shared several times that he heard it one way and she heard it another way.
Exactly.
And they would talk about it, and then they would get the recording back out and listen to it and see
Yeah.
what was really said.
Exactly. And again, as a family, like I said, caregivers are part of a team. You may not be being paid by the medical staff, but you got to keep it with the medications. You got to be aware of side effects. You got to report problems. You got to report progress. You likely are going to be asked how but sometimes you're going to be asked, well, what have you noticed about this patient? Are they able to sleep at night? Are they hyper all the time? What's their eating? What about the irritability? All these really important questions that the doctor needs to know about, or that the team needs to know about, that likely, because I hate to put it this way, but there's some people that don't want to share what's going on. They don't want to tell about the new pain they've got in their abdomen.
Part of that is they're scared,
Exactly.
because they're afraid that that symptom means that must be a new cancer or whatever, so it's like a denial.
Exactly.
If they don't admit it, then it must not exist,
Right.
kind of thing. And part of that is that. I know, I get frustrated when people like share things with me and they say, well, I'm going to the doctor. And I'm like, oh, well, that's good. You'll be able to, like, then they go to the doctor and then, and then I'll say, well, what did the doctor say about X, Y, Z? Oh, I didn't tell him. Like, you forgot? Oh, and then that's when I usually say, when you're getting ready to go to the doctor, make your list of questions. Write them down, because once you get in there, you're going to forget.
Exactly.
It's like going to the grocery store. I have to tell myself, if I don't have a list, I do things like, okay, there's 5 things I'm getting. When I get in the grocery store, I know there's 5 things. If I don't have 5 things, I forgot something already.
Right.
But if you're going to the doctor, then you really need to write down on a piece of paper ahead of time. What do I need to ask? What are the symptoms that I'm having, or what happened, whatever, so that when you're in there, because a lot of times you wait an hour and you see them for 15 seconds.
Exactly.
So you better like grab onto their coattail and say, I'm not done yet.
If you've had recent surgery, guess what? You have amnesia because of your anesthesia. If you have had chemotherapy, you're very likely going to get chemo brain, and chemo brain is real. It happens. In fact, we've had our folks talk about, well, I think I'm finally over my chemo brain. How do you know? Well, I haven't lost my keys in the past few weeks. But it's a reality. And so as you as a family member of that person that's dealing with chemo brain, you need to understand that. And as they're talking to the doctor, like you said, hey, you're paying the doctor for this visit. Let him know about those aches and pains you've got. Yes, they may just be arthritis. Yes, they may be old age. They may be something else.
I also read that you should make notes on good days and bad days of how you feel.
Excellent point.
Reaction to the medication, or I guess if you're going through like chemotherapy, or I was dealing with different things, like what it's actually like on a bad day, what it's actually like on a good day, what your actual how this is, and write that down. Like even like not, oh, I need to ask the doctor these questions, but so that when you get into the office, you can say, well, this is how it is on a bad day. Like this is what I'm experiencing.
Right.
Because when you're in there for 10 minutes, you could be having a bad day, or you could be having an okay day, or you could be having a good day. But to be able to say, like, these are how I feel, these are my symptoms, this is what I'm going through, and this is what this looks like. That way, like, it could be that, like, if you're okay that day, then you might not express, like, well, this is everything that I want to make sure that you know.
Right. Exactly. And also that will be helpful and very cathartic later on when you're past that, to go back and look at where you were. Because so many people have told me, I never knew that I was that bad off, or that I thought those things, or that I acted that way. But here it is. Either you documented it for me, or I wrote it down myself. Lisa's here. When our mother started having issues, we all made appointments to go with them to Birmingham to the neurologist because and we documented it. We had all kinds of pages of notes. I've still got a little file of that, all that, because we wanted to sort of see what was said then, what's said today, what's going to be, where we are. And if we didn't, because we had busy lives, we were doing other things, but that was important. So as a family member, you're playing a tremendous role as a tremendous advocate to that family member, even though if you may not be living next door to them or in the same town, you still can play a real important role to them. On the bottom of page 2, caregivers must somehow take care of themselves too. This was what Lance was talking about. For your own sanity, you need to go out with friends for casual conversation. You need to make time for yourself and resist feeling guilty for time away from patient care. Now, that's the tremendously hard part, because if you don't have many people to call up and to take over then you're with it 24/7. I think Don says that caregivers in dementia, the active caregiver, will spend something like 70 hours a week with dementia. Think about that, on top of them working in the regular jobs. There's not a lot of time left in the day to take a nap or to rest. And that's why caregivers, when I first started my program years ago, we had a separate class for survivors and then caregivers. And then it finally dawned on me, they both need to hear one another talk. And I actually had people in my classes that would say, well, you know what? Said sometimes when my wife when my wife does this in regard to her, it makes me so mad. And I thought, hallelujah, we have reached. Because he would not. And he told me later on, I never would have said that to her personally, but I felt like it was okay to say it in this group. That's cathartic. That's what we need. And that's what and then on the back page, what caregiver families may need from others. Yes, you have our permission to copy this and hand it out to all of your friends. Here's what I need for me to be able to take care of my loved one. I need you to help me. Which ones of those would be really good to have in time of need? Someone suggest a couple.
Well, the third one, cook food and freeze it for later preparation.
Yes, ma'am.
My brother has dealt with cancer for a long time, but last October, he got an ear infection that went to his brain. And his brain was full of infection. He had brain surgery twice within 8 days.
Wow.
But anyway, his wife is also dealing with early dementia.
Okay. Ooh.
So she was having trouble adjusting to, being able to take care of all of his food has to be pureed. And at first she said, I'm not doing it. She didn't understand the need for it. And I actually took her to talk to the doctor to see why it needed it, and then she accepted it. But it was still hard for her. She was to the point where she would go to the grocery store and buy groceries. And then when it came time to fix a meal, she would be spinning around in the kitchen saying, I don't have anything to fix. She'd forget what she even bought.
Yes, ma'am.
One day she bought a chicken and left it in the car and didn't even remember that she bought it.
Right.
But anyway, they realized they needed some help, and so they had the elders announce at church that they were looking for someone to help a few hours a week, and if anybody was interested, to let the elders know. So this young woman, Jennifer, who's only 30, she went to the elders and said, I would
do something.
So their daughters told her, they said, we really want you here to help mom more than dad. Because mom takes care of dad all day long. And when it's evening, she's tired. She likes to go to bed around 8 o'clock. And he likes to stay up more till like 11. And he needs to have eye drops put in his eyes before he goes to bed and stuff. So they told her, we really want you here more for mom. And she does laundry, she will cook and puree the food and put it in the freezer so that Gene doesn't have to do it. She'll go run errands for him. She would help him do his physical therapy exercises. She'll clean bathrooms, she'll do anything. And she has never let them pay her 1 cent.
Wow.
But I told my brother, I said, you need to fill her car up with gas every week because she's doing all this running for you. And he said, that's a good idea. So I think she does let him do that. She lets him give her gas money.
Right.
She's been a godsend.
Yeah.
She's been an angel of mercy.
Right. Do you think that that couple will ever doubt that there's a person like that exists called Jennifer? And the question is, how many Jennifers do we need to have in church, in our churches? Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Because that's exactly what they needed. And you don't ever know how much you need someone like that until you get in a situation where, because again, your life's caving in, your life's imploding, and you're looking around saying, okay, who can help me here? When caregiver cannot take a break and go out, give them a rain check and let them do it later on. Please don't say, oh, I'm sorry you can't come to our party because you're busy with your loved one. Give them a rain check. Well, we'll do that again another time on your schedule. You see the point? Thank you notes, help with laundry, yard work, exactly. Take them out for a meal one by one. Bring over dinner and games. Roll quarters needed at the hospital or token. We have a parking token ministry at our church, and they have to, when they get into the parking lot, they have to use tokens. We just hand them out right and left because that's one less thing they have to think about. And they act like I've given them $1 million. I said, well, that's, and we did it because of a church member that was in the hospital for a long, long time. The back page, we'll look at that just for a moment. These are actual quotes from cancer survivors in regard to family members. And again, some of them are pretty rough. But the point that, and what I asked them to do is, I said, if you were going to say something to your family member that you could get by with, you understand what I'm saying? If you could really tell them what you want them to know, what would it be? And this is what they said. Look at that first one. Don't dump your problems on me, because right now I'm just afloat, hanging on by the thinnest of margins. So I don't need to hear, another lady told me, she said, somewhere in here, I don't need drama. Well, unfortunately, sometimes in life we have drama that seems to reign there. Understand that my moods may be affected by my treatments. Stress is not a cancer patient's best friend. Think about that, what stress can do to a person in the lowest of moments. Well, I guess the point that I'm trying to make is you are connected to your patient, and you've got to take care of yourself also. So in the midst, which means you're going to need help from others as well. But I love what was said. The advocate, the navigator, that's tremendously important. Okay, we're going to take about a 5-minute break and come back for our last session together. So if you want to get up for just a moment, then we'll take a break and get back and deal with cancer and its relationship to depression.
Did you say people need tokens to get into the church parking lot?
In the hospital. That's a good one.
Well, I guess
Okay, we're going to go ahead and look at this last session together. And as I mentioned in the program, it says dealing with cancer and dementia. It should have said dealing with cancer and depression. That's my fault, I'm sure. Go ahead and mention something about tomorrow. In here, I'll be dealing with what church members need to know about dealing with cancer. Hopefully there'll be others here that will be here for services. And so I try to take the approach, okay, this is my opportunity for me to preach to the choir. So I will let them know what they need to know concerning dealing with people and dealing with not only cancer survivors, but also cancer caregivers. The church folks need to help them. And we need to be actively involved in their lives. So that's what we're going to be dealing with. And then at is it 10 o'clock hour? What time's the worship? 10 o'clock. Then we'll be looking at a passage in regard to when one member suffers, we all suffer together. 2014, 8% of Americans over the age of 12 have moderate to severe depression. More women between the age of 40 to 59 had more depression issues than anyone else. And women have typically a higher rate of depression than men do. Also, as it mentions here, women living below the poverty level were 2.5 times more likely to suffer from depression than others. And of course, you wouldn't be surprised, the CDC said 90% of Americans with severe depression said that their illness disrupted not only their work, but also their social life. And only 1/3 of folks with severe depression will look for a doctor to find help in time of need. Now, depression. When we mention the word depression, what do you think about? What comes to mind? What's some synonyms for depression? Down in the dumps. Bad. Sadness. What else? A lack of desire to participate in normal social activities. That sounds like a Webster Dictionary definition. I like that one though. That's exactly what it is. You know, we all have blue days. We all have bad Mondays sometimes. But obviously the kind of depression that we're talking about today as it relates to cancer is much more than that. First of all, some myths. All people with cancer are depressed. That's a myth in the sense of, statistically speaking, people that are dealing with cancer. One person said this way, I don't have enough time to be depressed. I'm dealing with cancer. Well, that would be true of other situations as well. Depression in a person with cancer is normal. That's not the case. Now, from time to time, I've had individuals that were in our classes that have told us, as much as I hated to do so, I asked the doctor for something that would help balance me out because of all the different things that I was dealing with my cancer, and said, it's amazing what, I forgot the milligram that lady was taking, but she said it was amazing what that little pill did just for those few months that I needed something to sort of stabilize me and to keep me from overreacting to all the things that I was going through. Now, other individuals, they don't need that. But just because they may need medication at that point in time, that's okay. It's not going to hurt them, and particularly and the individuals that I taught that I've dealt with in my classes are always very cognizant of trying to avoid anything habit forming. And I think that obviously makes sense. treatments are not helpful. That's obviously a myth. And also, everyone dealing with cancer faces suffering and painful death. That's also a myth as well. We've already talked about it. 2019, January 1, 16.9 million Americans surviving cancer. By 2030, they're saying it's going to be up to about 23 million. So obviously we're moving in the right direction. There's a reason for that. Better treatments, better understanding, better research, better methodology of treatments, surgical procedures. A lot of doctors, it seems like, in what I've read, are getting on the same page in regard to dealing with protocols. We have folks there at CCI that have their doctors constantly talk to folks like MD Anderson or John Hopkins or wherever the case may be, and there's a tremendous communication line that keeps going. That's what you want, and that's what we talked about last set. You want somebody to do that. And second opinions and third opinions are helpful. And most doctors will be readily glad for you to do that. I'm of the opinion if they say, no, you need to stay here with just me only, okay. Don't know about that because you might miss something. So let's talk about what depression is. It's a disorder by feeling down, depressed, sad, little interest, little pleasure in doing things. It's the idea of feeling hopeless. She mentioned the idea of, I just don't feel like I have the energy nor the desire to want to get out there and socialize and be with anybody. Usually, clinically speaking, it persists for 2 to 3 weeks, negatively affects their activities, their relationships. It's not just, I don't feel like I have the energy to do anything. It also includes, I don't have the energy nor the desire to interact with others. It's sort of like a closed down situation. Now, why would you think people that have cancer might feel that way? That they not only not have the energy to do something, but they also don't have the desire to be with others. Why? Yeah. The folks that come to see you at the hospital, they have those unfortunate, very non-thought out comments. You get a barrage of those kind of comments made to you, and you're going to think, wow, I didn't know I had it, that I was so bad. Because they just constantly make you feel that way. And think about it. If someone receives compliments and then you receive negative comments about you, which ones do we remember the most? Yeah, and we key in on that, don't we? We typically key in on that. I think the study was done that said that you have to have 9 positive comments to undo the damage of 1 negative comment. Well, sometimes it's hard to find 9 people that will say something nice about you. But you can certainly find the folks that will be glad to tell you how bad you really are. Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. Or like I said last night. Oh, well, at least you're looking real skinny now. Hello. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. That's what. I decided to have a really serious diet situation here. That's why I have cancer. Yeah. Hello. We got to remember that. The symptoms of depression may appear shortly after diagnosis or anytime during or even after. Again, remember, one of the side effects of some of the medications is this prolonged idea of not feeling well, of not wanting to interact with others, of not wanting to be around people. it just seems like bad news is coming from every venue, and therefore there's that idea of not wanting to feel the way you're feeling. Obviously, the background of that person in regard to what's going on in their life has something to do with it. Also, if they have close family members that deal with depression, they're dealing with that alone or lack of support, or if they're dealing with financial burdens. Just imagine that. Someone with no insurance, absolutely no insurance, trying to deal with cancer. And you go to a facility, and how are you going to pay for this? I don't have a clue. But I've got to have this scan because I've got to find out what's wrong with me. I got to find how whether it's spread or not, and whatever. Here's the way some people describe cancer. Feeling of lethargy, almost like having the flu, constantly having the flu over and over again, stuck in a dark tunnel, black pit, seeing the world through dark glasses. You get the idea of how a person's perceiving that in that regard? It differs from sadness in that it's a state of being emotionally blocked. It's feeling dead inside. Again, going back to what you said, not only do I not have any desire, I don't have any energy, and I don't want to see anybody or deal with anything. Well, and at that point in time, this is all they see, right here. Nothing else at that point in time. They can't see beyond that. And when you go in with your cheerful smile and your loving words of, oh, you can do better than this, is that going to be appreciated by someone in that kind of state? It really isn't. My graduate program, someone said, imagine someone that really cares about you saying hurtful and terrible things about them, and then further imagining walking around with that person inside your head talking about them all day long. That's what depression's like. Think about some statements that would hurt someone, that would harm someone dealing with depression. You're no good. You're not trying hard enough. You must have done something wrong. God's mad at you. No one cares for you anymore. And just imagine you take those phrases and you run that through your brain over and over and over again all day long. How are you going to feel? That's how people that are dealing with depression feel. We're talking about clinical depression here. Well, here's the history. 1960s, Aaron Beck. He's the father of depression in the sense of that he's the guy that came up with the name for it and the phraseology for it. He said it was characterized by thought patterns that actually maintain the depressed mood. In other words, you feel bad and it continues to make you feel bad. And you're saying, duh. But seriously, he's the first guy that came up with that. I think he's a psychologist, if I remember correctly, or a psychiatrist, one of the other. But he's the guy that said, okay, look, this situation makes them feel bad, which continues to lead them to feel bad. There's got to be a connection there, and this is what he came up with. Negative thoughts about self. Surprise, surprise. We've mentioned several times the book of Job. I think Job makes some comments sometimes about, man, I'm no good. Well, his three friends have told him that. Over and over again. You're no good, Job. You've really messed it up. And he started believing that. So negative thoughts about self, negative thoughts about the world. I'm no good, and guess what? I look around, and guess what? The world's no good. Which leads to what? thoughts about the future. Self-criticism, the world around me is no good, and I don't see it getting any better. Now take that framework and connect it to cancer. Let's bring up an episode. The doctor says to you, the treatments are not working in your body. We don't know what to do for you next. What's the third part of that? What are they going to hear in their mind? What are they going to surmise? Exactly. No hope. I'm dying. I better get my affairs in order. And then you have that kind of framework, and you're going into that individual to be there for them and their pain. What are you going to say? What are you going to do? Yes, did you? Okay, I thought you had a comment. Yeah, what do you, see, I mean, that's what we're dealing with here. And so what Beck found out was that that in order to undo this, you've got to change the way they look at themselves. You've got to change the way they look at the world, and you've got to give them hope. And hope is a relative thing sometimes. Go ahead.
Another thing, a lot of times, well, like my daughter, she keeps saying, why am I having to put my family through all this? And she gets in a depressed state because she feels it's her fault that she's going through this and now putting it on all her family.
Exactly.
And we tell her it's not your fault. But she, in her mind, feels it is her fault because she can't do what she did before.
Right.
And, just try to encourage her.
Okay.
And the doctors have told her, stay positive and keep doing what you're doing to keep her treatment going.
Okay. All right. Let's just take that as an example. Her daughter's feeling, she's the one with the cancer. Things aren't doing, all those right now, you said she's stable in regard to a situation, even though she's in a progressive stage. And she feels responsible that obviously she's not getting any better, or that she's caused all the family to have to suffer because she's in that situation. What could others say to her to help her? Anybody got any thoughts?
Well, nothing is too hard for the Lord.
Okay.
So maybe the medical team doesn't know what to do right now, but God knows what to do.
Okay. What about letting her understand that, number one, she didn't volunteer for this, and she just happened to be, unfortunately, the person dealing with this, and that if the roles were reversed, what would she want? If it were you instead of her, what would she want you to do? Well, she'd want you to know that she's loved, that she's cared for, that she's being appreciated, that she's heard, that she's being listened to, and that she's a person of value, that you're a part of this family and you always will be. And don't ever doubt that situation. Because I think sometimes in a time of whether it be a chronic illness, whether it be the cancer, whether it be dementia, whatever, we start undervaluing ourselves. And we don't need to do that. And it's really easy to do that because you don't realize how bad off you may be, or you think you think, I am causing all of this for my family. I'm just a burden to them. I'm just, they wouldn't have to, they wouldn't be, well, think about what, no, you're not a burden. You're anything but that. You always are a part of this family. Any other ideas on that?
I think you're always part of the family and you're worthy. Like just actually saying, like you are worthy of our time, care, attention.
Yeah.
I mean, I think sometimes that like can get overwhelming, I'm sure, for caregivers and they're trying to like juggle so many things that as somebody who's like suffering, they feel like I shouldn't be requiring this much attention, but I don't know what else I'm supposed to do. You know, like it just, it's not a good situation, but I think knowing that, you know, like we signed up for this too, like
Yeah. Um,
It's helpful or not, but I, in a situation like that, I think I might say, I love you and I don't understand why this is happening either.
right.
My thought in a lot of bad situations is always, God has a plan, we don't know what that plan is.
Yeah.
But he has a bigger picture. I have no idea how this could be in that picture. I mean, I've been in a lot of situations in my life where I felt like I had no earthly idea how this possibly could be okay.
Right.
But God has a plan, and we just don't understand it.
You know, in Luke chapter 13, there's the disciples come to Jesus and Jesus basically says, okay, he gives two examples, two historical examples. One of them deals with some Jews that came to the temple in Jerusalem, and Pilate took vengeance on them and sacrificed and killed them, and he said their blood was mingled with their sacrifices. And then and the question is, did these Galileans that were from Galilee, did these Galileans sin more than anybody else? And Jesus said, I tell you, nay, but unless you repent, you'll also perish. And then he mentions another example. What about was it 18 or 19? The 19 that the Tower of Siloam fell on. Were those worse off than anybody else in that city? Jesus did not answer the question, but said, I tell you, unless you repent, you'll also likewise repent. And the point that I think that he was trying to make is, they happened to be at the right time. They happened to be there at the wrong time for them, at the right time for something bad to happen to them. It was just one of those situations of life. And the point of the matter is, sometimes, you know, again, nobody volunteers for cancer. Nobody volunteers for dementia. And so we need to let them know, hey, look, if the roles were reversed, you would be doing the same thing for me that I'm doing for you, and then some. We're in this together. And I think what Jesus was trying to say in Luke chapter 13 is, you know, it just happens to be bad situation. You know, I mean, in Alabama, we've got folks that are non-vaccinated, and they're getting the Delta variant, and guess what? They're dying. And the doctors and the governor yesterday said, I'm sorry, but said, you know, if you don't take the vaccine for your own protection, ultimately there's nothing that the doctor can do for you if you get that strain and you get worse. The vaccine won't help you now. And a UAB doctor told that to someone that was dying. I'm sorry. And she went and told her family. And they were all just appalled and gave their reasonings or their excuses why they had not got vaccinated. And she said, would you please go do something for me, for your loved one that's dying? They said, what? Go get vaccinated. It's too late for them, but it's not for you. When we deal with depression, as the note says there, the bottom of the page, it's 80-90% respond favorably the first year. And when you take psychotherapy and medication, it does wonders for most folks. And so we need to remember that there's no reason that a person can stay in that situation if they find the help that they need. Now, what I have on the last 2 pages is just. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I just wanted to say that I have found, and I think it's getting better, of course, but there has been a stigma
Tremendous stigma.
taking medication.
Yes, ma'am.
And I think the church has made that stigma worse. Because there are people in the church that believe that you shouldn't have to take medications. If you have faith, like the problem is that you're not praying enough, or
You're not. Yeah. You.
or whatever. Or I have heard people say, well, but if you have to take that now, you won't be on that. It's all, I'm just like, what? Why are we still at that? People need to know that it's okay.
Yeah.
Because there are people that need to take the medication and they need to take it their entire life. And we need to not make them feel like, again, just like the woman telling her husband, it's not a lack of faith.
Right.
If you need to take an antidepressant for your entire life, that is not a lack of faith.
Right.
It's a chemical imbalance that you
Yeah. Again, particularly if it's genetic makeup, it runs in the family. You can't help that. Your genes are your genes, and therefore you may need something that will take care of you and that will help you. Paul told Timothy, the water you're drinking is causing you to have stomach issues. Go drink some wine for your stomach's sake. Well, the reason was because the water at that time frame was polluted. It wasn't good for Timothy, and he was evidently having some really bad problems. Well, as it were, Paul said, here's the medication you need to take. And there's nothing wrong with you taking that medication. So we need to remember that. And yes, unfortunately, there's been a stigma about depression, and we need to avoid that. And we need to be grateful for the medication. Again, we're not talking about over medicating someone. We're not talking about using alcohol as a crutch or anything like that at all. We're not that at all. But there's a reason why you go to a doctor and a doctor prescribes you medicine. He thinks you need it. Take it when you can. The last 2 pages are just basically for your own benefit in regard to sometimes how a person feels. And what I've often done with this is, and in the first page is intentional in regard to, okay, tell me today how you're feeling. Well, then later on, tell me today how you're feeling on the last page. And there's obviously a progression of feelings there, and that's why that's there in that regard. But let's just wrap up by saying, cancer can be very debilitating. We want to do everything we can possibly do to help us or to help someone that we love as they deal with their cancer. The same is true for dementia. We're all in this together. The church is a family, and because the church is a family, it means we care for one another. And I hope and pray that our time together today has been helpful in every way. I so appreciate your coming to be with us, whether it was close by or an hour and a half away, like these good folks over here. And we pray for everyone's safety going back. Hope you have a good rest of the day. If you can be with us tomorrow, be with us for our classes and our time together. Let's pray together. Loving Father, thank you for the day. Thank you most of all for Jesus. Thank you for family. Thank you for friends. Thank you for people that care. And help us to be those kind of people. Help us to be cognizant and try to live and walk in someone else's shoes before we make judgments about them. Most of all, may we help to carry their load as we try to carry each other's load for our life and most of all for our service to your name. Thank you most of all for Christ and for his church. In his name we pray. Amen. Thanks so much for being with us today. Appreciate it.